Oh, goodness. Can y'all shut those big doors right there, Robert? That glare coming off John Davis's head is killing. Wasn't there no rock and roll song at one time called Blinded by the Light? You're not recording yet, are you, Rob? All right, it is good to have you all here tonight and hope that you've had a great week. We'll go ahead and get started. And Mr. Thomas, would you care to open us in prayer?
Most gracious God, Heavenly Father, Lord, we come to you tonight and thank you for all that you want to bless us. Lord, thank you for us being in your house again, Father God. Heaven, here to bless us, Lord, that you have my praise for us, Father God, and pray me, Lord. Lord, we like to thank you for this glorious weather shining out upon us, and we thank you for the rain, Lord. We might gripe about it a little bit, but we still love it, Lord. We appreciate it. Lord, thank you for everything. Thank you for our church, Father God, heaven, everybody in it, Lord. Thank you. And pray that you be with the ones that couldn't be here tonight, Lord. Lord, we love you and praise you. And it's in the most precious and holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, we'll go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Genesis chapter 19. We're going to pick up with where we left off Sunday. Remember, Sunday we talked about the unexpected guest and how that will throw fear and chaos into a family, especially if they got young kids, because the house is usually what? A mess. And that's just kind of the way it is when you got kids or grandkids staying over. And so we talked about that, but we saw how Abraham was able to deal with that and the influence that he had on others. And this chapter, though, goes into a different type of description of Lot's life. And it's actually, you can see really a spiritual decline in Lot's life from, the very beginning. Abraham had just entertained them, but we know Abraham, we know his service, and he was sacrificial, and all that. But let's look at Lot's life in verse 1. We're just going to kind of hit some high points about Lot's life. One of them is his location. Verse 1 says, "And there came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat at the gate of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground." Now, when we read that, we just say, well, Lot's just kind of sitting there hanging out and all that. But that's really not the case. When we see the phrase that he sat at the gate of Sodom, it appears that he had already abandoned his tent. Remember, earlier, Lot kept getting a little closer and closer to Sodom. And, that's kind of the way the devil works. If he can just draw us in little at a time, before long, we've left way over here and we end up way over here. And because he was sitting at the gate, this location leads us to believe that he had already established himself in the city, because that is where a lot of business was taken care of as people would enter into the city. So we see this was kind of what was going on with Lot. He kind of just eased on in and taken right up with the city living of Sodom. But it also says in verse 1, "at even." Now, that's in the King James. If you read other interpretations, it would say evening time, things like that. It was, in more of the darkness type. But if you look back, and a lot of people make this parallel, when Abraham was visited, it was at the hottest part of the day. So it was as light as could be. When Lot was visited, it was at a dark time of day. And a lot of people will make a parallel that Abraham was walking in the light, Lot was walking in darkness. That is a very big stretch as far as saying that's exactly what it means. But I think we can parallel that and just apply it. I think we're safe in doing that. It kind of gives a picture, if you will, of both lives. And it teaches us that worldliness and sinfulness is not necessarily a geographical issue, but it's a heart issue. When it's all said and done, sinfulness is a heart issue. All the actions and all the things that Lot done were symptoms of a bigger problem. Him hanging out in Sodom, him being partakers of that, him wanting to be in Sodom, him really liking Egypt, all those things, they were symptoms of a bigger problem. They were symptoms of a bigger problem when he allowed his herdsmen, I believe, just might make that interpretation, to kind of not get along with Abraham's herdsmen. You know, these are symptoms of a spiritual issue. Another thing that Lot did is that he called himself a servant. Verses 2 through 5 say this. And he said, Behold, now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go on your ways. Now, and they said, Nay, but we will abide in the street all night. And he passed upon them greatly, or encouraged them greatly, that they turned in unto him, and entered into the house, and he made them a feast, and he did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, now this is what's kind of crazy. This is how far Lot had allowed himself to go, to be associated with so much sinfulness. Now remember, who are these two guests? Now they were in physical form, but who were they? They were angels, okay? Remember, Jesus had stayed back. If we go to the idea that that was the Lord incarnate kind of right there, kind of like when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, remember they were in the fire, and the old king looked up and said, Whoa, I thought we put 3 in our boys, but man, I see 4, you know? So it's kind of the same picture with Abraham. And so we see this, and as the 2 men, or the angels, remember though, they're representatives of heaven. That's the key. They're representatives of heaven. Lot never recognized the difference with them, though. I think Abraham realized that there was something different about these guys in the way in which Abraham acted, how he responded, and like I said, we dealt with all that Sunday morning. But after the 2 angels, or the 2 men, they came into Lot's house, this is what happened in a nutshell. All the men, they saw what was taking place. They just gathered. I mean, they were just bringing people like crazy. All these men coming around, surrounding Lot's house, hollering at him. Lot, hey, introduce us to your new friends. This wasn't the welcoming committee. These men wanted to have sex with these 2 men, or the angels. Verse 4, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called out unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. That phrase, we may know them, is not talking about, Hi, my name is Mike, what is your name? And we shake hands. It's not talking about that. It's talking about a physical, sexual relationship. And I mean, that's, you know, it makes me wonder if that just didn't take place all the time, as far as people showing it up at everybody's houses. And we know that it went on all over the place. But, you know, it was such a state of non-spiritual that it was just an assumed practice too in some ways. Listen to what Lot done. Verse 6. And Lot went out the door unto them, and shut the door after them. And he said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. He still understands it's wicked, though. And you know, that's something. He understands that it's still wickedness. Behold, now, it's funny he understands that's wicked, but look what he's getting ready to do. I have 2 daughters, which had not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do you to them as good in your eyes, and only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. So he walks out to him and says, Listen, guys, don't mess with the two men. I've got something better. I've got 2 younger daughters that are virgins. Why don't you take those 2 girls, young ladies, do with them how you see fit? You see where Lot's at in his life? Now, Lot should have, after he realized the men were there for wickedness and he understood the wickedness, he should say, Boys, turn around and go back where you came from. But he didn't. These are still symptoms of being non-spiritual. Now, we all may think, well, man, we're not that bad. But just think, and I made this statement Sunday, a lot of times when we think of Sodom and Gomorrah, of course we think of the bestiality, the homosexuality, all the things that just go on. And we just go, ooh, no. The thing about it is, though, is when you go to the New Testament in Romans, where it talks about for the wages of sin is death. Not just that sin in the Old Testament. Guess what? You may not commit that type of sin, but the sin we commit, there's still a wage. It's still sinfulness. And Christ died for all of those sins, of course, because he don't want anybody to perish. But we see that he offered his daughters to the crowd. What would Abraham end up doing, offering him and Sarah's son? Who would they offer their son to? To God. It's amazing the difference, isn't it? It really is. It's amazing the difference. But even through all that, look in verse 12. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. I think right here, Lot got the picture. Lot was extended some mercy. Lot, do you have any other family members besides your daughters here? Do you have any other family members? Now, before I just forgot, but the angels actually interceded. They went out when Lot's trying to give them the daughters, and they grabbed Lot, basically yanked him in, shut the door, and supernaturally they blinded the eyes of the men to where they just walked off. That is where, it's like, wow, there's something different about these guys. And then they go right into saying, listen, this is what's going to happen, but God wants to show you some mercy here so you can get out, but it's also going to be justice right behind it. Mercy and justice kind of go hand in hand. They're on the same coin. It's kind of the front and the back. I mean, it's all part of God's nature. And a lot of times we try to separate it, and I understand that, but really it's all part of his nature. It's hard to separate his nature and his character, but there's different components of it. This, to me, is the saddest part of Lot. How far he had gone. Verse 14. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. Lot had lost his influence. He had lost his influence, and it had been lost for a while. The angel said, Listen, Lot, you got other family members. Go, plead with them. This is an act of mercy. We want them to be saved. We want them to be saved. Lot goes, talks to his, family. Guys, listen, this is what's coming. They laughed at him. To me, it shows us that Lot had no spiritual influence either in the city or in his own family. The first time Lot was rescued, he was a prisoner of war. You remember back in chapter 14 when Abraham had to go to war? Actually led a raiding party because Lot was taken as a prisoner of war. And sometimes God allows situations in our life, too, to help us and show us things about his will. You would have thought that experience would have brought Lot kind of closer to him. But really, Lot just wanted to go back to Sodom. That's all he had his mind on. He had a one-track mind. I want to go back to Sodom. Lot's life, to me, is a warning for all believers. We need to listen to God as he intervenes. or you may lose everything. And we're going to deal with that part of it Sunday morning. Everything that Lot lived for, everything that he gained, went up in smoke. Went up in smoke. How did Lot get to this point?